11:30 a.m. She slept in his bed, wearing his shirt, her bare shoulder exposed, the scent of last night clinging to her skin. Aaryan stood still, shirtless, wet from his morning swim, eyes locked on the one woman who slipped past his guard. Low, teasing whisper. "So, you finally managed to climb my bed, Miss Khanna," he murmured, lips closed but didn't kiss. His smirk, dangerous, his eyes on fire. Last night, Zoya's residence, late evening, around 11:30 p.m. The city had quieted to a sultry hum by the time they stepped into Zoya's upscale apartment tower. It was 11:30 p.m. and the air felt thick, alive with perfume, whispers, and the weight of unsaid things. Aaryan, ever the composed force of nature, stood beside Meher, his sharp black hoodie hugging his torso like a second skin, his chiseled face half covered by a sleek designer mask. But even that couldn't shield him from the spotlight he unconsciously invited. As the elevator doors slid open with a polite chime, two society aunties immediately turned to scan the pair. "Hello, auntie," said Meher, keeping the exchanges to minimal. Their expressions were a blend of suspicion and smug curiosity. But it was the woman in her late 20s, draped in a crimson sari with enough gold to signal her marriage intentions, who refused to look away. Her gaze was piercing, bold, carnal. She didn't blink. Eyes shamelessly traveled down Aaryan's tall frame, pausing at the contours of his arms, the line of his jaw, and finally, his hands. She licked her lips. Aaryan shifted uncomfortably and tried to hide behind Meher to avoid the unwanted gaze. Meher felt the tension rise and fought back a smirk. For once, the man who made women stammer and grown men sweat was squirming. Sliding closer to him, she said loud enough for all to hear, "This is my boyfriend." Gasps, a raised brow from the aunties, and a flinch from the predator in red. Aaryan turned to her, a slow grin spreading under the mask. "Boyfriend, he whispered, good enough for her ears to catch, voice dipped in sinful delight. His arm wrapped around her waist, just enough to make her breath hitch. "You do realize you're playing with fire, Mrs. Khanna," he added, his fingers grazing the soft fabric at her hip. Meher tilted her chin, unbothered. "Only because I know how easily you burn." And just like that, the elevator doors opened, and they both moved out like wind. But the temperature inside had already hit dangerous. Zoya's apartment, 8th floor, late evening, 11:35 p.m. The elevator doors parted with a quiet hiss, like a secret exhale before the storm. Meher stepped out first, grace wrapped in panic, heels clacking against polished marble as she tugged Aaryan by the wrist. Her breath was shallow, her pace determined, as though fleeing a scandal caught mid-bloom. Behind her, Aaryan emerged, elegant and poised, save for the flicker of discomfort still dancing in his eyes. The predatory gaze of the woman in the red sari from the lift clung to his skin like smoke. Meher, muttering under her breath, "If we'd stayed 10 more seconds, I'd have had to file a harassment complaint. On your behalf." She jabbed the doorbell, twice, sharp, commanding. And then Zoya appeared, tripping in sequins, cupcake in one hand, gossip-ready grin in the other. Her entrance was less welcome and more spectacle, as if she'd known the script and had been waiting for her cue. "Oh ho ho," she beamed, eyes dancing with the mischief. Look what the cat dragged in. Together. Then she saw him, tall, brooding, mysterious, and breathtakingly handsome, like some hero out of a fantasy love story, masked like a forbidden fantasy. Zoya's gaze fell, no, latched onto Aaryan. And you are the Aaryan Khanna, she purred, stepping closer. Aaryan, ever the gentleman, extended a hand. Nice to meet you, Zoya. But she didn't shake it. She claimed it, her fingers curling around his as if she'd stumbled upon treasure. A beat passed, then another. And still, she held on. Maher finally spoke in a deadpan voice. Zoya, he gave his hand for a handshake, not as a long-term investment. Let go. Zoya's laugh was soft, indulgent. But she took one more second before releasing him, her fingers reluctantly slipping away like silk from skin. Inside, the apartment pulsed with soft candlelight and low music. Vanilla warmth mingled with the tang of spilt vodka and barely contained secrets. In Zoya's bedroom, Maher collapsed onto a beanbag, limbs splayed dramatically, her expression that of a woman who had just survived battle and gossip. Zoya, she groaned. I risked my life in that lift tonight. Zoya arched a brow. Did it break down? Worse. Maher sat up with flair. That woman in red practically devoured Aaryan with her eyes. I had to claim him, declare him my boyfriend. It was that or watch her throw Sindor in the air like confetti. Zoya gasped theatrically. Damn. Was it that bad? Maher nodded solemnly. No worse. The red sari lady undressed Aaryan with her eyes. If I hadn't stepped in, she'd have proposed marriage and started the feiras on floor 8. Aaryan, silent till now, looked up from his phone, his expression unreadable, trying to hide the faint pink crawling up his ears. I didn't know I was trafficked out of an elevator, he said dryly. Zoya burst out laughing. Don't worry, darling. If Maher hadn't jumped in, I absolutely would have. The room melted into giggles and teasing chaos. But beneath the laughter, beneath the pretend, a glance passed between Maher and Aaryan, lingering, wordless, a whisper of tension that neither sarcasm nor humor could mask. For in the war between hate and desire, sometimes the battleground was an elevator, and the victory was a cupcake. Maher was curled on the beanbag, arms folded, silently observing Aaryan scroll through his phone with that maddening calmness. Suddenly, he looked up and spoke in a smooth tone and a playful glint. How about we take this night up a notch? I have a chamber booked at Elysium. Maher's eyebrows arched. Elysium? That place with crystal chandeliers and 5,000 rupee cocktails? Let's leave, Aaryan said, voice velvet dark. Elysium's still open. Maher blinked, surprised. The Elysium? He leaned in, elbows on knees, voice barely above a whisper, but enough to stir goosebumps along her skin. I have a permanent chamber reservation at Elysium. I thought it's time you saw what billionaire's luxury feels like. Let's go. At Elysium. 12:30 p.m. The private elevator hummed softly as it lifted them into another universe. Opulence carved in crystal and champagne. Floor-to-ceiling glass revealed a city that bowed beneath them. Everything shimmered. Lights, liquor, and desire. Meher stepped into the room and stilled. It was palatial, lavish, and it suited Aaryan far too well. He belonged to this world where everything was exclusive, unreachable, and paid for in blood and brilliance. A man built for midnight deals and morning after headlines. And yet, here he was, letting her in. Aaryan approached with 2 flutes of champagne, offering her one, his fingers brushing hers a moment too long. "So," he murmured, voice dipping low, "if this was our real date, how long would you last before falling for me?" She took the glass without blinking. "Exactly as long as it takes to pour this drink over your head." He chuckled, sipping his drink, but the glint in his eyes said he loved the chase more than the catch. Inside Elysium's elite chamber, 2 a.m. The music throbbed softly in the background, bodies swayed. Laughter spilled like expensive wine. But inside Aaryan's private chamber, the air had changed. Moments ago, Meher had witnessed something at the bar. A soft laugh, a touch on Aaryan's arm, that breathtaking woman in the black gown, her lips dangerously close to his ear. And just like that, the fire ignited inside Meher. She didn't speak. She just reached for another drink. And then, another. Zoya whispered in a worried tone, "Meher, slow down." "Meher, I'm calm, Zo. Totally zen." But she wasn't, not even close. Jealousy was not her color. But tonight it painted her cheeks, warmed her chest, and curled her fingers tighter around her glass. Zoya whispered beside her, "That looks intimate." "Please," Meher said tightly. "He probably flirts with mirrors when no one's around." But as Aaryan glanced at her from across the room, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips, Meher knew he had noticed her stare. And worse, he liked it. Aaryan returned minutes later, just in time to see Meher whirl toward him, eyes dazed and daring, her breath warm with vodka and rebellion. Meher spoke with a slight slur. "You think you can flirt around and I'll just sip mocktails and smile, Mr. Khanna?" Aaryan blinked. "Excuse me?" But before he could step back, she grabbed him by the collar, pulled him close and kissed him, and then moved to kiss his neck. No warning, no softness, and then left a mark, a love bite just below his jawline. Slow, deliberate, branding. Aaryan stood completely still, utterly dumbstruck, his breath hitched in his throat, his gaze locked on the faint red mark blooming against the curve of his neck, like a scandal whispered in silk. Was that a love bite? He smiled within. The temperature in the chamber surged, his skin flushed, and with that Meher fainted, right in his arms. Zoya stood frozen, her jaw nearly on the floor. Is she okay? Aaryan, cheeks flushed, still composed, adjusted Meher gently in his arms. Managing his composure, he said, "She'll be fine. She just needs rest and water. Maybe 10 years of therapy." He carried Meher like she weighed less than air, his arms cradling her with the gentleness of a man holding something far too precious to break. And as they moved down the grand marble corridor of Elysium, it wasn't just a walk. It was a cinematic spectacle. Cameras flashed, heads turned. The crowd parted like a royal parade had just begun. Yet Aaryan moved unfazed, protective, almost possessive, his hand shielding Meher's face from every angle, as if the world didn't deserve a glimpse of her vulnerability. And his security? Oh my God! They weren't just guards. They were shadows, forming a wall of black suits and intent glares, closing around him like a scene from some billionaire action thriller. It was all so coordinated, so choreographed. Zoya, in her head, stunned. What even is this man? Is he for real? Did I just witness a live scene from a Shah Rukh meets James Bond crossover? Every second felt like watching the climax of a blockbuster movie. Only the heroine was passed out, and the hero looked like he was about to burn the world down if someone as much as blinked wrong. And Zoya, she just followed, slack-jawed, starstruck, utterly speechless. Because damn, Aaryan Khanna didn't just exist in the world. He owned every frame of it. Aaryan's penthouse, 3 a.m. They entered the penthouse in a hush, like an unfinished sentence. The city skyline sparkled behind the glass walls, indifferent and glittering, as if unaware of the storm that had passed. Aaryan carried Meher into his master bedroom, the rich interiors drenched in shadows and understated opulence. With careful precision, he laid her on the silk sheets, her lashes fluttering against flushed cheeks. Her breath was shallow. Her scent, heady with wine and something dangerously feminine, lingered on his skin. He turned to Zoya, his tone clipped yet composed. "Can you help change her clothes? She needs to rest. Give her this." He extended a freshly pressed, oversized white shirt. His shirt. Zoya's eyes sparkled with teasing suspicion. "You've got a type, huh? Fiery, complicated, and slightly drunk?" He exhaled sharply, gaze flicking to Meher with unreadable softness. Just dramatic. The drunk part is totally new. Zoya chuckled and guided Meher gently. She curled up beside her, on the bed, a friend shielding another from the debris of a night that had unraveled far too many emotions. Aaryan turned on his heel, walking out with practiced calm, but beneath the still exterior, his pulse raced. Inside his study, he poured himself a glass of water, then another. The silence echoed, thick with something unsaid. His fingers drifted to the side of his neck, where her lips had touched him. A graze of desperation, a half-drunk, full-hearted mark of something she hadn't meant to leave. A lovebite. The first time Meher's lips had ever touched him. It wasn't pain that lingered. It was meaning. And something dangerously close to want. He smiled faintly to himself. Not smug, not stunned, just quietly shaken. "Good night, Mrs. Khanna," he whispered into the darkness before switching off the light. The morning after, Aaryan's bedroom, 9 a.m. A golden sliver of morning light slipped past the sheer curtains of the penthouse bedroom, casting a honeyed glow across the sprawling king-sized bed. The silk sheets were creased, the scent of roses, champagne, and something dangerously magnetic still lingered in the air. Meher stirred, lost in slumber, a picture of chaos and calm. Aaryan's crisp white shirt hung loosely on her slender frame, the fabric bunched slightly at her waist, one side scandalously slipping off her left shoulder, exposing sun-kissed skin. Her dark hair tumbled over the pillows, cheek pressed into the plush linen. lips parted in soft, wine-heavy sleep. She didn't belong there, but she fit there, like temptation incarnate, curled into his world. The door opened with the softest click. Aaryan Khanna stepped in, towel slung carelessly around his neck, droplets of water still clinging to his chest from his morning swim. His black joggers rode low on his hips. But it wasn't just the heat on his skin that made his pulse shift. It was her, sleeping in his bed, wearing his shirt, looking like every forbidden dream he'd once dared not entertain. He paused at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, gaze sharp, burning a trail across her exposed skin. The swell of her thigh, just visible where the shirt had ridden up. A slow smirk curved his lips, one that spoke of pride, mischief, and the tiniest flicker of surprise. She had fought him for every inch of power, every stare, every word. And now, she slept where no other woman had ever dared. He stepped closer, his voice a velvet murmur dipped in heat. "Good morning, Mrs. Aaryan Khanna." She didn't stir. He arched a brow. "So you finally climbed into my bed." His chuckle was soft, low, barely more than breath, but it echoed like a challenge. He leaned over her, placing one hand on the mattress, the other brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her cheek twitched under his touch, her lips moving in a half-dreamed protest. God, she looked intoxicating. He dipped closer, so close that his breath tickled the edge of her jaw. For a second, his lips hovered near her skin, as if pulled by gravity and the echo of what they could never admit. But he didn't kiss her. He exhaled slowly, eyes drinking her in one final time, then straightened. No, not like this. Not while she didn't even know she was unraveling him. With a last glance at her peaceful face, he whispered under his breath, a devilish smile playing on his lips. "Careful, Meher. You're waking things neither of us are ready for." And just like that, Aaryan turned and walked away, leaving a silence charged with everything he couldn't say and everything she might remember. Aaryan's penthouse, dining area, 10 a.m. Sunlight poured like honey through the sheer curtains, casting a golden glow on the minimalist luxury of Aaryan Khanna's penthouse. The breakfast table was a portrait of understated elegance. Fresh fruit, pressed juice, artisanal croissants, and one woman with absolutely no filter. Zoya, seated comfortably at the table in one of Aaryan's oversized hoodies. She was sipping her orange juice like it was gossip in liquid form. Aaryan, across from her, had his usual poise. Black shirt, silver watch, jawline taut with restraint. That is, until... Click! Meher entered the room, dressed in his oversized white shirt, bare legs, tousled hair, and a very confused expression. She looked like a walking contradiction. Bashful innocence wrapped in last night's scandal. Aaryan looked up from his coffee and forgot to blink. Meher cleared her throat as she slowly stepped into the living room, her voice groggy. "Morning. Sorry, I don't quite remember how I got to bed." Zoya's grin was instant, wicked, like a cat who'd caught the canary and planned to make a slideshow about it. She took a sip of her juice and dramatically declared, "Oh, sweetie, if only you remembered. It was wild." Meher froze mid-step, one brow shooting up, Across the room, Aaryan looked up from his coffee mug, a silent warning in his eyes. Too late. Zoya leaned forward, her voice dropping into a sultry whisper, like she was reading out loud from an erotic novella. You were virile. I mean, I tried to sleep. Really, I did. But the sounds coming from the master bedroom? She clutched her chest with mock shock, like a slow burn romance novel on surround sound. Meher blinked, stunned, her brain struggling to reboot. The words just slipped out of her mouth in a soft whisper. What? Zoya nodded with absolute seriousness. You called him Aaryan exactly 6 times before biting him like a cupcake. Poor guy. I thought you'd consume his entire modesty. Aaryan choked on his coffee. Meher gasped, pure innocence wrapped in disbelief. I did what? Zoya leaned back, devilish delight dancing in her eyes, and pointed, ever so casually, to Aaryan's neck, where the faint outline of a lovebite still lingered. She smirked. Exhibit A. Aaryan, caught between a blush and a smirk, rubbed the back of his neck and shot Meher a sideways glance, one hot enough to melt marble. Playing along, he quipped, I've had worse injuries. Meher groaned and covered her face. I hate you both. Zoya sang sweetly, Love you too, Mrs. Khanna. The room erupted with laughter. Even Aaryan chuckled, though his eyes lingered on Meher a little longer than they needed to. And as Meher sat down, cheeks still glowing with embarrassment, she couldn't help but notice 2 things. His shirt still smelled like him. And maybe, just maybe, she'd left her mark on more than just his skin.